If you're tuning in, we are going live for day 2 of the discussions regarding the whole woman way and what wholeness inside of womanhood looks like. And today my guest, Devashi Shakti, is, I like to call her the OG of feminine embodiment. Like, you know, it's a bit of a catch cry these days, but like, what would it be, 10 or more years ago when I met Devashi, she had already been in this field for years. This woman is truly a visionary leader. So get excited and start thinking about questions. How are you, gorgeous?
Hi, I'm really good. And you are looking gorgeous today. And you always are, Marina. You know, I see you online sometimes when I'm looking online, and your beauty stops me in my tracks every freaking time. Can we all just take a breath and acknowledge the beauty of this being?
About this filter. It helps. But you know what? I'm going to receive that, and I will receive it. And it's actually perfect that you started with that. So notice the slight discomfort in my body, and I still feel it in my nervous system. And you and I have known each other a long time, and we're going to talk today about womanhood. And one of the stories that I ran growing up, thank you for the love hearts, everyone. It's so lovely to have you here. One of the stories I ran growing up was that I needed to be like a man and powerful like a man and strong like a man. And I was one of 2 girls in my family. And my mother, and I think I've always said the first feminist I ever met was my father, because he only had 2 girls. And I think he was of a generation where he knew how men often thought of women. And so he was determined to be the opposite, but he went all out being the opposite. You know, like, girls, you can beat the boys, as good as the boys. Yeah. And I think I was really, out of the 2 daughters, definitely his tomboy, although my sister is a pilot and both of us studied aviation to follow in his tracks. We adore our dad. But the point is that growing up, I heard a lot, it's better to be smart than it is to be pretty. It's better to be smart than it is to be pretty. And then I was always told, oh, you're really funny or you're really smart. So in my head, I was like, oh, that must be their way of letting me know it's okay that you're not pretty because you're smart. And so, you know, I also then really shunned a lot of my femininity, married someone that was my absolute best friend, and we had a wonderful relationship. But by his own admission, he never really saw me as, I suppose, a feminine beauty, or like, he always complimented me on my capabilities and my power, but never on my appearance. And so it was really only after divorce that I had to start I got to start the journey of receiving praise for my appearance. Like, it started really late in life for me because I'd always just discounted it. So it's interesting that you started our conversation with that, because part of me still finds that very uncomfortable. And equally, I'm deeply grateful for that beautiful compliment. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. You are seriously gorgeous and very smart and talented. The gods were very generous the day that you came into form.
Well, I mean, honestly, I could mirror back all of that to you. And a lot of people on my channel, I mean, if they've listened to our podcast, and I know that they have, but it was one of the OG podcasts, although we did tag on the School of Growth the episode, and I highly recommend you go back if you want more of Devashi. And of course, check out all her amazing offerings. But a lot of people may not know Devashi, so would love you to share. But when I first met you over a decade ago, you were this mystical to me. And keep in mind, I was more in my masculine, a lot more in my masculine back then. But I just found you bewitching because you were this true feminine creature back then. Well, before that was even a phrase. Feminine embodiment wasn't a phrase, wasn't a thing.
True. Yeah.
And you and I were so different, but there was this under thread that was, we just went like this. I don't know if you agree. It was like, done. And we would dance at each other.
I totally remember this day. 100%. Yes.
And I was like blown away because you were the creator of Tigress Yoga at the time. That was your primary focus. And I know you still have a movement in that space, but I also know it's evolved. And that's one thing I'd like to talk about today, the fact that we get to evolve. But to me, that was so brilliant, because I was like, wow, this woman is so deep in this work, and she has created the first yoga by a woman for women around feminine embodiment, because a lot of people don't know that yoga was created by men often through a masculine process. And I was blown away by that. And then of course the work that you've done now with Shakti University and the high level of I would say even spirituality that you work at is truly not met or matched by many. And so I'm always just like super chuffed that we're, you know, soul sisters, but also that I get to grab you for these kinds of things and say, will you talk with me? And you're like, of course I will. And I'm just so grateful because you are. So you're in Bali. Tell everyone a little bit about what you do and where you are. Just introduce us to you.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I'm an ever unfolding mystery, even unto myself, really. And
Yes.
I'm very much in here in service to the goddess, to restoring feminine wholeness on the planet. And it is my soul work, and I've been able to make it work as a business as well. But primarily it really is my real spiritual path. Yeah, so that's a little bit. I can tell you so much more.
Only a little. And this is the thing, like if we sat here and talked about all the things that you do and the depth of your study and your devotion to your craft, I mean, we just ramble for ages, but I really want to dive into some juicy conversation points with you that I am having with numerous women. But the reason I'm particularly excited today is because of your visionary work and because you are looking at a through line, I know that we can have a different kind of conversation today. So firstly, I would love to hear your take on what is your favorite thing, just straight up, about being a woman for you personally? What do you love about being a woman today on the planet?
Well, you know, they're kind of two different questions to me, but I want to answer the second one that I hear. So it's like, what does being a woman mean to me? What does being a woman today mean to me? They kind of elicit different answers. And today it is, oh my God, the incredible challenge, the very real challenge that I experience in like really embodying trust and surrender, and how truly challenging that is in such an uncertain time. It's always uncertain times, but it's so amplified now, you know. So to really feel safe in my body, to really trust the divine plan for humanity and actually feel it in the cells of my body, in communication with the earth, with nature. Yeah, this is a practice. Yeah.
It is a practice, and it's funny that, again, it's not funny, it makes perfect sense that you've started straight off with surrender, because just the other day, and I've been going through a real shedding this last 18 months in particular, in fact probably 5 years now, shedding. How much more can I shed of an old identity? How much more can I surrender and let go that that's not actually who I am today, etc., etc. And just
that's exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting, but it's also the unknown. And it's that relinquishing of the safety of the belonging that you had associated, you know, with that old identity. But I agree, it is beautiful, and it's the metamorphosis of what creation is about, right? But I had that realization the other day, and noticing in myself that resistance to what do I do though? What do I do? And I just want to know the way so I can step into it. And just this piece of me that still wants certainty and security and certainty. And then this reminder that just really came in with, you know, and you and I have talked privately about truly perhaps indescribable, or words can't quite comprehend, but logic definitely can't comprehend, experiences that I've had in my life, and I know that you've had similar, and that in those moments it was always preceded by true surrender. Like I had this realization just last week. I was like, Marina, every time that you have just let go and like let it flow, like hand over, you know, I've got friends who will talk about, you know, Jesus take the wheel, or that kind of energy, just like, that's it. I don't know what, but I surrender it to something higher. Every time I've done that, it's always unfolded in ways that I can't control, and not controlled as in I could never have foreseen, right? And it's not about control, it's flowing through me. And yet, as you said, it's a very real dance to keep stepping into that space. So I would love to hear from you. I mean, I genuinely want to know for myself, what would be your suggestions around how do we practice that in a tangible way?
Yeah, well, I mean, immediately in my experience and in my answer now, it's trusting the intelligence of my instinctual body that already understands far more than my intellectual intelligence can interpret and fathom in my conscious attention, you know, and really like resting into the power of my spirit or my soul essence. You know, the bigger, greater parts of me that actually know exactly what's going on, know exactly how to take me through this time. So it's like letting go, leaning into those greater levels of intelligence that are literally always here for us.
Yeah. And, you know, through coaching, I'm helping people understand the subconscious mind. And I know you're deep in that work too, but beyond that into somatics. And that's what we're really just discussing here. But there have been times, and I've just for the listener, just to really drop in here, we've all had those times where we've been hit with an intuitive or an instinctual gut reflex, like what I call a deep knowing, an instinctual, non-logical knowing. And then we tend to either want to rationalize it away. And what I would encourage you to do is every time that you think back to when you've had one of those and you didn't listen, over time, generally life kind of showed you that you should have. That's what it's certainly been like for me. And I imagine it's like the case for you. So given that we have a monkey mind that's looking for evidence, you can even retrospectively do that. So the next time you get a hit, and it's funny you say we live in really uncertain times now. And I know that about 18 months ago or so, I had a massive intuitive hit to my gut with a really strong directive that since then, despite all the additional study, research, etc. that I've done, that has been my North Star. And I keep coming back to that. It's just like, I just know. And that's the trust piece that we're talking about. But it is tricky in the modern era where we're getting this way or go that way, or it should look like this, or it should look like that, to keep coming back to that centered knowing. But I think if we do, there is a calmness and a trust there that we can just like fall into.
Yes, totally. And you know, I went there to the answer about being a woman today because, I mean, it's already very vulnerable for us as women to really feel, you know, really feel our feelings, really connect with our instinctual senses, in direct connection with nature, with the earth. It's already very opening and really shows us the depth of our receptivity. But to practice that now is like an ever evolving daily experience for me, you know. And it's like to feel it in my body, in my feminine body, takes that slowing down from that faster mental or monkey mind place into, you know, letting all the intelligence centers of my feminine body slow down to the pace of the earth, the slower, more stable, rhythmic, ever-present energy of Mother Nature, and receive information from there, which is totally different to what can come to us through our thoughts.
So what I'm hearing is that, and I mean, it's been said many times by the greats over time, that the rhythm of nature, you know, is the true power rhythm that will essentially foundationally be the guide over time. And we tend to want to race it, beat it, and, you know, progress it, etc. And I know for myself, a walk in nature, just grounding my feet, or particularly for me, sunlight on my skin, or, you know, feeling the elements immediately brings me back into a sense of calm and stillness. So for people who are living, and, you know, in the last 2 years, we've literally been locked away indoors. But would you say that a big part of finding wholeness as a woman is tethered to your relationship with nature? Or, you know, what would you suggest for people who are like, I don't have time to go to the forest? Ladies, that's all good and well, but I don't have time for that. You know, what could they do, or what would you suggest?
Okay. Well, firstly, I definitely do recommend experiencing your feet, the soles of your feet, having some connection with the earth, even if that's not a full-on deep shamanic experience. It's, you know, we need that direct connection, because it's part of what unhooks us from the artificial matrix and gives us that embodied sense of sovereignty. So it's essential to me. But the thing is, we are nature, and so you can be inside in your house, just say you can't go outside for whatever reason, we can still feel that, you know, letting go into the subtle experiences somatically of our inner body, and still feeling that magnetic connection with the earth is totally possible too.
Yes. I agree. And then the slowing down is key. It certainly has been for me. As a very fast-paced,
Yeah.
yang, originally wired individual. And so I'm curious then for you, because, you know, we all have had our pathway and we all are on our own path of unfolding, as you mentioned at the top of the chat. For you personally, what do you think has been the biggest story you've overcome, or pattern or programming or conditioning that you personally were like, oh, you know, Marina, that's what I used to really believe about womanhood, and now I'm just so over here, or I've really integrated that into more for myself. What was the thing that kind of caught you up from being in your wholeness, would you say, initially?
Oh my gosh, there's so many I could pick. I mean, the biggest thing that stands out to me is maybe not necessarily so much about being a woman in particular, but it is a misperception of myself based on trauma. So the way that I understand trauma from a very multidimensional lens is that when someone is so dysregulated, they become so, you know, wounded, that they cannot hold that charge in their body, so they've got to act it out, and that just gets passed on and passed on. And when being on the receiving end of trauma like that, yeah, it is like an artificial veil over the truth. And so all the times that I mistakenly believed that you know, that I wasn't worthy of being treated well or whatever like that, and just ran my self-perception through this distortion, this psychic imprint that got put into me, right? And so the wholeness journey and that has been cleansing and purifying and clearing that out of my space, so it's no longer this veil over my perception of myself or others.
Yes. Well, what I'm really feeling in that is that one of the elements of wholeness is an understanding of our innate worth, isn't it? And yet we do grow up in collectives, whether they're initially family or beyond that in the broader societal context, where I mean, you mentioned trauma, and it's an interesting thing, and I have written about this before, that I feel people, I mean, we know this, linguistics are loaded and people make meaning from words, and trauma seems to be one of those things. It's like, well, I don't have trauma. That's, you know, that's, and, you know, people talk about trauma with a capital T or clinical trauma now, and there's all these distinctions. But I am of the belief that if you're walking in a skin suit and you identify as human, you've had some kind of trauma. If we use trauma to be defined as anything that, any moment that we decide that our wholeness is not welcome, and we edit it or modify it as a protective means, like you say, like a veil, or we allow someone's conditioned armor to become our own. Like, it doesn't have to be post-traumatic, you know, war kind of trauma. Of course, there's a scale, there's a spectrum to everything. But if you're walking the planet, you've made meaning of stuff. And often it's around our worth to have whatever it is that we currently don't have, but we say we want. And that's where we get to kind of dive into it. But I couldn't agree more. This conversation of worth and I'm not enoughness, or I don't deserve, or I need to earn, is so prevalent that it's almost unseeable, because it's just in everything. It's, do you ever feel that it's just like in people's language? It's just, you know, and I have 2 daughters, and just yesterday on the beach, I have one daughter that is, you would laugh how wired for the coaching stuff she is. The way she queries people questions, and she says to me yesterday, Mum, I've had this realization that the thing we unpacked the other day, I think it's actually this memory, and she shares this memory. And of course I talk her through the somatics of the uneasiness in her belly, and essentially in this particular story, you know, someone had said to her, you know, things come so easily to you, you really need to learn grit because things come easily to you. And so she coded in that moment, oh, I have to work hard to earn things. And I just let her move through the body and notice that what she was feeling in her body somatically was easiness. So her body had said, oh, it's wrong to have things be easy, so I will make it uneasy. And she literally loaded it in there. But just in giving her, you know, tools, as we know how to do, and reframes.
I love that conversation you're having with your daughter.
You would have loved, I mean, honestly, we have the best combos. And we're having a bit of a girls' little 36-hour getaway thing. So it's so cool. But one of the things, and I said to her, I said, you know, there's another way you potentially could have viewed that. Like when someone says things come easily to you, that isn't that awesome, that you don't have to try for things because they're just easy for you. And it's not easy as a shame on you for having it be easy. You need to learn to work harder. And she actually just laughed like this little child. You could feel this little child laugh of like, I'd never thought of that like that, because of the way the person had projected it through judgment and anger. And I was like, I mean, technically, how awesome is it that things are easy for you? And so she had, you know, some real gifts around. But it's true, right? That these little benign conversations that we have, there's these imprints and these imprints and these imprints, and we just lose sight. We lose sight of what we can have and how easy it can be, and how much life, when we open to it, this has certainly been my experience, how much it just wants you to have the more of natural abundance, not more consumerism level, but just the full flow of, as you say, nature. Nature, like the sun doesn't choose to shine on the prettiest flower, it shines on all flowers. And like we're just in humans, we just seem to have done a real job making it harder to be happy than we need to. So yes.
It's true. It's true. And if we see our, you know, maybe ultimate option of being totally embodied in our spiritual sovereignty and really knowing ourselves at that level, like the truth of who we really, really are, any rupture from that, any disconnection from that can be translated as trauma emotionally, somatically. And so, yeah, there's so many different kinds of trauma, and every single human born on planet Earth has some levels of developmental trauma, which is different to, you know, the big T, big event, you know, like obvious abuse. So, yeah, everyone has that coming into this dimension. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's so good that the conversation around it is really getting out there, isn't it?
I think so. I'm, and again, you know, with that comes a whole, we tend to just go so, you know, so far sometimes. And it's interesting to watch what's happening in that space too. But when you mentioned there about being in, you know, full sovereignty of our wholeness and embodied in that, and for someone listening who's like, you know, I know I play small. I know I worry about what people think. I know I'm not quite doing what I should be doing yet in life. And I hear you use those words, you know, like embodied sovereignty. And I would love for you to share what that is in a real sense. Like, what is the reality of that? Why should we as humans even bother striving for that? Because it sounds like a lot of work. You know, like if someone's sitting in that frame of why is that good? Because I don't know about you, Devashi, but having worked so many years in health, what I came to realize is the people who had been healthy seem to naturally be wired to move back there because it's a pull. They know what it's like. They know how valuable it is. They know what it feels like. And so the absence of it is so painful that they're naturally attuned to it. And then there would be the clients who didn't know what it felt like, and it wasn't, they kind of were doing it, but really with a lot of faith. And then when they got there, they'd be like, I had no idea that it could be like this. And so I'm just, I feel called to ask for the people who are like, well, I hear these words sovereignty and wholeness and embodied feminine, but like, what's it really like there? And is it really worth the effort? What would you say to that?
Oh my gosh, lots of things. So firstly, what else is there? You know, in the sense that I believe our true work is restoring this wholeness, not just for ourselves, but for the entire planet as conduits, you know, and our, what we call work, that to me is like an expression of our service, and we happen to get paid for that if we do, right? So this world has got everything backwards, like opposite, you know. Our real work to me is this path and of remembrance and embodying that. And our, I don't know if we could say like life in the matrix is like part of the functional journey of being here at this time.
I agree. You know, I'm on board. You're preaching to the choir, but I feel like sometimes people don't really grasp the degree of suffering that occurs when we are separated from our truth as in our innate wholeness, our innate worth, and inside that matrix. And that might show up on the daily as just constant frustration. It might show up physically because of that repression of what wants to be expressed, being held in the body. It could show up in lots of ways, but generally it is a lack of ease. Would you agree that it's just this, like on a somatic level, I want to go, like it's like an exhale. There's a softening in our whole nervous system when we step out of that illusion and into, well, out of the illusion of the matrix and into the truth of sovereignty and into the truth of wholeness and that journey. And it's certainly not to say that it's all sunshine and rainbows, right?
It's full spectrum. It's a full spectrum journey. and it's one that we can palpably, tangibly feel in connection with our bodies. So it's not like shifting around mental concepts. Am I there? Am I not there? There's no question of experiencing it more, you know, and we've got a ways to go as humanity in fully embodying that, right? So we're with it as much as we can be on any given day, and it's a continual evolution. And to me, that's like, I see it as an adventure, as a sacred adventure that I'm up for. It for sure, it involves persistence, devotion, dedication. But honestly, why are we here if not for that?
Yes. And so what would you, if someone was like, okay, well, Devashi, I get that this is what you teach, this is what you do, you live it. What are some tangible suggestions that you could give someone that you like to do that maybe even support you in finding your wholeness, or particularly given the depth of your somatic training, your body work awareness? What would you suggest to women physically to do, if physical is what you would suggest, that would allow them to move towards this embodied experience? What tips would you share?
I don't know if I can contain it to tips, but I can highlight some themes to then go and explore much more fully. Like, I mean, many traditions talk about these three main centers of intelligence and how the society that we're living in is very much occupying part of this one, you know, to do with the mind, although it's beyond that too. And so for women, what I recommend is really exploring the heart intelligence, also really exploring womb, instinctual body intelligence also, because, oh my God, they're infinite in how much we can actually experience and come into connection with and remember about, you know, who we really are. So we're not sourcing that from how I think I should be and how I want to be, because that person is, it's very internally sourced and gives us such a sense of our own inner authority in that, which is part of the journey to embodying wholeness and sovereignty. So yeah, go to your body, right? Rather than trying to figure it all out mentally, and make friends with this incredible creature.
I would absolutely second that. And I would say that even if people, because I work a lot with women in their masculine moving, and so the question I just hear all the time is, but what do I do? You know, which of course is ironic because that's literally the trap that we're in. But in coming into your body, as you suggest, even just, I found breathing into my heart as a focus, so that when I took my breath, cycling it into my heart chakra was very good. Particularly, I found that to be very healing, like post-relationship, where I had started to feel my armor returning after a particularly traumatic breakup. That I found that to be truly powerful, which again, sometimes these simple things are like, oh, well, who's got time to do that? Well, make time and you'll see why that's highly valuable to do. And then even for me, and again, I can speak to this because I was someone so in her mind and so masculinely run and so, you know, that the tangible tools eventually led me to be able to let go of them. But I also found, and what you've suggested there by body, for the person who's like, but what do I do? Just literally notice sensations in the body. Would you agree? Because for me, it really was like, I'm actually feeling tension in my belly. Okay, is it a tingling? Is it a stabbing? Is it a contraction? Is it a flippy floppy? Like, just attuning and listening is actually a skill, the same way it is attuning and listening to a human in the room.
Really
You
is.
have a whole wisdom center here, and it is trying to communicate to you. So for me, just sitting and literally stating, I went through a process where I would say, I feel tension, or I feel tight. And by verbalizing, it's like my body felt heard and seen and acknowledged for the first time. And just in voicing it, it would just soften. It was truly profound. So these are very simple beginner practices, but I would recommend, as Devashi says, coming into the heart and the body. The whole world could benefit from that. Man, woman, or, you know, identifying as whoever or whatever on this planet, that's going to serve all of us. Take more time for that.
And it's true. It's literally, healthy for everyone. But for us as women, in a lot of ways, you know, we, it's like our sacred responsibility to keep clearing and up-leveling the emotional field. And so, I mean, that's so much where our power is as women, of feeling and sensing and receptivity. And if we aren't in direct relationship with that, then we're not really bringing greater levels of feminine consciousnness and, you know, divine feminine energy and presence to the planet. So yeah, but on a practical level, it sounds like it's a beginner practice, but it's something that I continue to do every single day, to be honest. And like a really practical suggestion is maybe just play some music that you really love, like 2 or 3 songs, and sit down and just allow all the information and all the experiences that are being contemplated and, you know, chewed over mentally. Let it actually digest, let it feel through your emotions, through your heart. So it's actually like digesting information, and then, you know, being with it as tracking sensation, like you said, Marina. And, you know, in the world of somatic psychotherapy, particularly from the deep feminine perspective that I come from, there's a whole repertoire of somatic skill sets to learn in how to do that.
Yes, I think music, well, it's that flow state, isn't it? I love that. And I love what you're saying, allow that rumination to digest, because sometimes we just chew the cud, you know, or as I like to say, we mentally masturbate, you know, just constantly. When you know, it's actually not going to give us what we're looking for, because it can't resolve it. It's literally just wired to continue to compute. It's supposed to be a servant, not a master. Devashi, you are a real leader in the feminine embodiment space. And I know when you speak there about, for women on the planet right now, that it's, you know, it's our sacred work. And I'm curious right now, particularly moving into the future, what do you feel is the next frontier for women? What is the work that you either feel we're going to have to move through, or that you want us to move through, or that you feel it doesn't really matter, we're going to have to unpack and explore? What do you feel is the work of particularly the whole woman on the planet, if we really step up to this, I suppose, calling? What's required of us right now, do you feel?
Honestly, it's all the things we've been saying, but understanding why you would make it such a big priority. Because if we're looking on a practical level at the world right now, there is a very spiritually immature 37-year-old male at the helm of driving humanity into this trajectory of life online. Like actual, most of life being
It took
online.
me a second. I'm like, why is he 37? I was not following you for a second. Got it. Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah.
Not that I believe he's operating alone, but and there's others, right? Yeah. So there is this inevitable future where a lot of humanity are going to probably get lost in the artificial realm, the artificial metaverse, right? And so us demonstrating by example that we value feeling, that we value connection with our bodies, with nature, with the earth, and making sure this thing for women in particular, making sure that that imprint is passed on to children, making sure that they get to grow up with this treasured memory of how potent, powerful, beautiful, healing, healthy that it is to be an actual real human.
Yeah. I think I remember actually a really powerful conversation we had when I rung you once for some guidance on something I was moving through. And something that struck me in one of your responses was, Marina, we just at the moment need to be a stand in every way, shape, and form for crystalline, organic matter, because that's what we are. And it just hit me, the way you worded it, and I'm not sure if that's how you would word it now, but just so you know, that really struck a chord with me. And I was like, because there are forces, and I think potentially in their, you know, in their intention, it's about progress and power and progressing us, but it does take us staying attuned to at what cost. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. That's where if humanity can evolve, in my opinion, to a really matured, wise, as opposed to just constantly wanting to learn more, you know, the information age, when are we going to reach the wise age, you know, the wisdom age, where it's like, well, you know, maybe it can take a little longer, and that's actually better. Maybe slowing down is better. I mean, we have lots of conversation pieces, and I think in some aspects we have a huge awakening occurring. And there are some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm so full of faith in where we're going because of the movements and, you know, the people stepping forward and the choices being made. And then, you know, there are other days I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've sold our souls. We're so far up shit creek. I want off. I just want out, you know. And I'll be honest, like depending where I place my attention, it will really affect how I'm viewing what's possible. And I think that's important to remember, is that there are two aspects always available to us. And what I'm hearing you say, and what I heard you say that day when I called you, was organic and natural. If that is the work of the woman on the planet today, is to remind everyone, children, you know, partners, workspaces, the value and the potent power that innately resides in that. And in whatever way feels alive for you to do that, then do it that way.
Yes. And we can't teach about something or say something is important if we're not in an intimate relationship with it already. We've got to like embody our valuing of it, you know, and want that and desire that, right? So we can talk about things that women can do, and they can feel however they feel about that. But the thing is, we've got to let go of what's not true and what's not real. Like, a lot of the work is actually releasing false perception.
Yeah.
Right. And this whole thing about the artificial metaverse and all of that, it's all voluntary. Okay. So when we'll get this wisdom age? When enough of humanity decides that it's fucking valuable. Right? And that we aren't trying to source this sense of who we are through an online persona primarily, because that's never what is going to satisfy and fulfill. There's so much distortion in it, right? Like, it's so beautiful to be acknowledged and all of this, but how we get really seen, this whole language around being visible and being seen and la la la, it's like, yeah, share your work, but don't forget that being felt, being known, being heard, being seen needs to be rooted into us from our real life offline, or else it's not actually real. It's not actually happening.
Yeah.
And so all of this, you know, establishing, trying to get all the things that we actually truly need for our human development and continual evolution from this artificial reality, you know, is never going to be the way. It's leading us away from that natural, organic, crystalline nature of our sovereignty. And I'm saying this as someone who's obviously not anti-social media. I'm not anti building a business platform online. I'm not anti-money. Like, it's nothing like that. It's like, let all those things be there. Enjoy all those things. But if we don't have really strong sovereign roots into the ground, into our own real lives, and what I call like, I don't know what anyone else thinks when they hear this term, but it just has come through to call it our planetary identity, right? Like remembering, hang on a sec, what is your real mission here? Rather than believing all of the constant narratives coming out of the artificial world and just trying to, you know, optimize that, capitalize on that as much as possible. Like,
I don't know about you, Devashi, but I feel that we sometimes, it's like we get caught in the wave of, you know, and this is the power of momentum in healing and transformation and growth work, but also in our demise, because we tend to just be caught in the momentum and without the awareness and the presence of like actually every day stopping and going, do I choose this? Would I choose this again? If I project this into a future, you know, down the line, is that actually what I would consciously choose now for future me, for my children, for my family? And I think if we really brought presence in through awareness on the daily, we would choose differently. But we're in the habit. Just don't know. It's like, oh well, like even as an example, today we went to my girls and I, after a morning walk and ocean swim, we went out to breakfast, and I sat down, and it was the second cafe I'd been to down the Gold Coast here, where they give you the little tablets and you order from the tablet. And now I'm an innovator. I've innovated in industries my whole life. I love innovation. I love change and metamorphosis. And I was like, oh, this is fun. That was my first instinct, like, oh, you know, boom-bitty, boom-bitty, boom. And then I paused and I said to the girls, I said, you know, I do wonder though, is this just another way where we've taken out human interaction? Because I don't talk to, there's now not like a human taking my order, you know, and I can't ask them things, but I can put it in and it gets the job done. And I suppose what I'm saying is it's in these moments where we get to really be with the consequence of all of our choices, because every choice point is a ripple of a consequence. You know, the way we talk to our lover in the morning, the way we, you know, greet someone at the shops, it all has a ripple in reality. And we're sometimes just not attuned to, I don't think, those small moments. And I mean, technology, it's the perfect example. So much progress. You can be in Bali and I can be here on the Gold Coast, and we're talking to people out there in the ether. That's magic. That if we don't believe in magic, then how? You know, how do we not believe in magic when that's happening? I'm old enough to know this is magic. But that's beautiful. And I think as we become wiser, the discernment point is at what cost?
Yeah.
And where and when do we say, we hold the line and we say, no, that's too far? Because that's what I agree. I agree that's where we're going. You know, and I've never been a gamer, and, you know, it's never been a thing for me, but I know, and I have friends and family members, like they're gone, they're in a vortex, they won't come out, you know, they don't engage with us anymore, they're in gaming. And I agree with you. And I heard about these, you know, future realities. I'm like, and what about this reality? Like I'm looking at the ocean right now. What about the ocean? You know, and the sand in your feet. Does no one want that anymore? I certainly do. I have felt, you know, ecstatic bliss in presence in this body with nature. But I imagine there would be other people, Devashi, and I'm just assuming, who would say, well, you know, when I feel blissful is when I'm flying through some extreme reality with goggles on my head. I don't know because I can't speak to that, but I do wonder, will we regret our choices? And will we be, the other thing is, will we be brave enough, courageous enough to correct them if the time comes where we recognize we made that error? Because that's the biggest thing, is we tend to want to be right about the choices we've made. And so we dig deeper holes in that righteousness. And that's where we lose ourselves, because it's fine to make bloody mistakes, right? It's totally fine. But I was brave enough to back up and try.
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, at this point, it's more of, not in the future am I willing to have the courage to confront myself with that, is where do I need to do it now, today? Because I think everyone listening to this understands that the devices and the apps and the platforms have literally been designed to be addictive to the human brain. And we're all addicted already to different degrees.
Yeah.
And so it's just about getting very real about that. And I've been having this conversation a bit with the women in training with me, and just really recently. And it's not just a matter of, you know, tracking how many hours you're mindlessly scrolling on the phone or whatever. It's, to me, like, that's not enough. It's not enough to know that it should be happening less. There needs to be something compelling, something that you're cultivating and generating a desire field around in the real life offline that pulls you to it because you want to, because it is amazing. Without that, to me, it's inevitable that that kind of vacuum into the artificial world will just happen.
I think you've nailed it. And I have had similar conversations. I've had people say, oh, Marina, when I've explained, you know, what people far wiser than me who understand NFTs and online world, and they're like, I don't understand what people are going to do with these things. I said, oh, they're going to hang them in their houses in their virtual world, and they'll have jobs in the virtual world. And they're like, I don't understand though. Like, and I said, well, this is the point. And they're like, but people will never do that. I said, well, actually, people who don't love their lives, who are not healthy in this reality, whose body doesn't feel fucking amazing, who don't have orgasmic interactions with other humans on the daily, who don't know how to be in the bliss of laughter rippling out of their body in this reality, they're going to move faster than we can click our fingers into a new reality where they can create just with their fingers the illusion, or, you know, a delusional illusion of a new reality. They're going to move there faster than, so we might sit here and go, surely people won't. They will, because their current reality is full of pain, full of suffering, full of aloneness, and not full of, as you said, something compelling that lights them up. And they're just seeking their own light and will mistakenly think it exists in this flashy reality. And I know there are people who might disagree and think, well, you're just resisting progress. I'm happy to be that craggly old woman who's a stand for this natural world. That's fine. And I do believe that's, like you say, perhaps why we are here at this time on the planet, because we still see the value in that.
Exactly. And the role of woman to imprint children with that experience, with that memory, is just unbelievably important right now. And not just like to tell them to get off their phone, and to demonstrate that by example, you know. And I know that that's hard. You know, I speak to women who are like, I just picked up my phone in the kitchen while, you know, cooking, and, you know, 45 minutes later or whatever, you know, it's just, they don't even intend to do that, but it's happening. And so to me, this is where somatic therapy, somatic alchemy, spiritual practices, they're my things that I love. I have like a generated, cultivated magnetic energy field that I've built around these things that are literally like a magnetic force that pulls me to be with that. I literally don't understand how someone can lose 3 hours scrolling on Instagram. I can't even imagine being entertained for that long by what's there. I just find that very hard to relate to. But I know that that's because of how I've been living my life, by much beauty and pleasure and amazing experiences have been there for me by opening through the portal of my body. And it can be very multidimensional. It can be very earthy and ordinary. It's full spectrum. It's just so important to be honest with ourselves about where we're already at, the effect that it's already having on us.
I agree. And I think it's you know, our reality often, when we compare it to other people's, does sometimes feel like, I don't understand, you know, like you said, how people can scroll for 3 hours. And yet it's, you know, even though we can talk about these esoteric concepts and somatics and nature and all these things, at the end of the day, it does come down to habits. And the question that might just pay to sit with if you're listening to this is, what can you not do in a day? Like, where are you addicted? And do you want to take your power back by being at least flexible in our behavior? If you're not flexible to be without the phone, then it has you. It has your power because it has your attention. And one of the things Look, I'm certainly not a perfect mother, but I am conscious of my mothering, and I'm conscious of screen time with my girls. And there are definitely days I beat myself up, and then I'm conscious of that. So my work is in being kind to myself. But there are things, practices that we do, which is mostly just presence. You know, for us, it's just presence with people. So dinner is sacred. We sit down at the table, we give grace, we be with each other, we be with our food. And so just, if you're listening, it's not to say that you need to start homeschooling your children and, you know, burn every technological advice. But I feel like for women, it's reminding people of where we can claim our power back. And not just from technology, from people pleasing, from unhealthy choices. What we acquiesce to, we are choosing. And sometimes I get it, we're tired and we're exhausted, and it's like, oh, I don't have the fight today. But do you want a life that is worth staying in? And if the answer is yes, it's not about fighting against something, it's about standing for something. And that feels different to me anyway.
That's it.
It's like what I want to create all in and claim for myself and my children, as opposed to what I wanted to defend against. It's just a different energy, but it might help.
Yeah, totally. It's not about being against anything. It's about taking a stand. And you know, I know what those compelling things for me personally are. For someone else, it could be gardening, could be painting, could be dancing. But it's like, if there's not something that is actually anchoring, because of the force of this momentum into the online artificial world ramping up more and more, if it's not enough of an anchor, what someone is, you know, allowing themselves to enjoy in their real life, then it might not be compelling enough beyond the mental conversation of, oh, I should be doing that thing. It doesn't have to go to that place. You know, it can come from want, from desire, from pleasure, and being led by that energy in us, and retaining a sense of wholeness and sovereignty through that thing, whatever that thing is for you, right?
And so as a final question, and perhaps that's already the answer to it, like for someone who's feeling stuck or small or without their power and is like, knows they're just going through the motions, would your advice be find a way to cultivate genuine joy, like whatever that is, like look for it, cultivate it? Or would there be something else that you would suggest? Like, what would be your advice if someone is like, I hear you ladies, I can see you're lit up by your lives, I don't know how to get there. How do I reclaim my power?
Yeah.
How do I stop feeling so small in this world?
Yeah, I mean, if I just kind of wind time back for a moment in my attention and go to, how did I even come to the things that I do? How did I even, you know, come to innovate these new evolutionary applications of things that I do? It's because I listened to my inner knowing, even when that was heavily in contrast to the status quo, even when that was heavily in contrast to what people just accept as fundamental reality. And that's how I came to do what I do at a fairly early age, because I wasn't so afraid to go against that. So I feel like it starts with being willing to face that contrast, and learning how to experience that, to witness that, to be present to that, and still feel a sense of self within it. And so, you know, how do we build that desire field, that joy energy that you talked about? I feel like it starts with questioning what your spirit, what your soul is guiding you to question, and having courage to follow that, see where it takes you. Because I didn't know when I was doing that it would take me to who I am and what I'm doing now. I did not know that. I just knew that I knew the voice of truth moving through me. I knew that even if it meant, you know, being alone forever or whatever, I was not going to sacrifice this experience of coherence, experience of wholeness and sovereignty within me. Not that I ever knew what those words were when I was a kid, but I was feeling it, right? And I know that every human can feel that in their own way. So there's so many little moments in life where we can recognize that moment. And instead of just conforming, instead of just merging with the status quo, with the other person or whatever it is in that moment, can you hold the like dynamic tension of the energy of contrast and allow your experience, allow another person's experience, allow, to me, there's like a gap there and a spaciousness to remember, hang on, I didn't come here to fit in to the regular program. Like, and I know a lot of people feel that way about themselves at certain points. And I really believe that we came here to evolve what humanity is experiencing, not to just go to sleep within the program. That was never an actual option in my experience when I was younger, right? So yeah, it's just having the courage to listen to that, to notice it, to follow it, to trust it, and see where it goes.
Yeah, I love that. And I think if you're listening and you really just heard what Devashi said, it really does all start with a returning to self, and choosing not to abandon, because, you know, if you abandon yourself, it doesn't matter who accepts you, you're still alone because you didn't bring yourself. You know, like this is it's that paradox, and we can know it logically, and we can even feel it somatically. Being alone in a crowd is a very real thing that many of us have felt before. But when you are home with yourself and you're willing to not abandon your allness, as you're saying, what's real and what's true, that is the most, in my experience, the most powerful, nurturing, safe experience that I've ever somatically felt. And that's what I'm hearing you say. And the way I describe that is start listening and then just follow the crumbs. And that's the beginning of the faith piece, right? Going full circle back to where we started. The trust piece is, if you just follow the crumb and you start to realize that you're being supported and guided, it gets easier and easier to follow bigger crumbs and to fall forward or fall backwards, or to trust fall, you know, with the universe and with, you know, whatever you choose to believe in. Yes, I 100% echoing and love how you phrased that. That was beautiful.
And so, I think you touched earlier, Marina, but being willing to go the wrong way and learn from that, right? Or, you know, the wrong way, and just let go of this sense of having to fit into this model of perfection that I think can even come up for people around the language of wholeness and nervous system regulation. I've started to see that a lot, and I really feel like it's important to not bring that old energy of not good enough, got to try fit in, got to be perfect, that's strongly embedded into women's negative programming, into the somatic science language, or, you know, the spiritual language, or whatever it is, and recognize when that's happening, because we are full spectrum beings, and we never truly get to know who we are uniquely if we're not willing to make a mistake and find out for ourselves. How do you get to lead yourself if you're not, you know, actually experiencing that? You're following or you're leading, you know?
I love that. And I think you're right. And again, we hear it all the time. Don't be afraid of failing, da, 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 da. But it's true. I mean, you don't know a yes until you taste a no, right? Sometimes you just don't. You don't know the yes until you taste the no. I couldn't agree more. And for me, definitely letting go of perfectionism was probably the biggest key. But that was not an easy unfolding, because we believe there's so much safety in our perfection, and we're so resistant to being perceived as anything, you know, and society certainly does a wonderful job of trying to hold us to that. And ironically, what I'm hearing you say is, you know, being conscious of taking those same patterns forward, but in different, maybe
different language,
slightly hidden ways. You know, I see this now, it's like, you know, now we just embrace everything, except not like that, because then we'll cancel you. And I'm like, I don't understand how we're apparently, you know. And I know then we change on the woke, and it's like all the different words, and then and it's just like, guys, you're still playing the same game. You've just taken the rules and put it in a different arena. Like, when is it going to stop? When are we actually going to meet ourselves and each other with compassion, and with genuine curiosity, and with acceptance that it's all okay? Yeah, I feel you on that. And I think that is a conversation perhaps for another day that we could really dive into, because sometimes, I'll be honest, I choose not to engage online, because I feel like the conversations are, when I say petty, it's like, how do you engage with that? Because the conversation is ruminating on a point that I feel like we should have moved through 10 years ago.
I feel like that all the time with what I see online.
Yeah. And yet, you know, when I hear you say that, I'm like, well, don't you stop showing up, Devashi. We need, you know, so I'm going to take that as an awareness to myself. I'm like, well, maybe we should show up a little more. And yeah, just something to think about. There's some love hearts on that. So you just, Kellyanne saying,
Actually,
seeing
that's
you
the thing.
in conversation. Yes. Hi, Kellyanne. Beautiful angel light that you are. And also a smile from heaven was saying she had the same conversation earlier. I think that was when we were talking about the tech and the social palette saying, oof, releasing false perceptions. When you said that earlier, that hit her. So thank you everyone for joining today. And if you didn't get a chance to watch this in its entirety, you should definitely make time and have a good listen to Devashi. Of course, check out her amazing work in the world. She is always giving. I know she has so many communities online. So hit her up, DM her, find out how you can get in her space and receive her wisdom more. But Devashi, thank you, beautiful, for joining me today. It is, as always, such an honor and a privilege to be here in this timeline with you, if I'm honest. That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
I feel the same way. Beautiful, divine sister. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Big loves. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.